My name is Colby Wren, and I didn't even want to party. If I'm being honest, the moment I walked into that candlelit room and saw the banner that said surprise, I already had a knot in my stomach. Not because I hate surprises, but because the whole thing felt off, manufactured. Like I was walking into a scene someone else had rehearsed too many times. It was my 44th birthday, but I felt like a guest at someone else's wedding. I didn't recognize half the people clapping. There were coworkers from jobs I'd left years ago, a cousin I hadn't spoken to since my father's funeral, and even my high school gym teacher, who I was pretty sure was dead. All of them smiling like they were told to. And in the middle of it, standing beneath the string lights with a champagne flute in her hand, was my wife, Lacey. Red dress. Lipstick too bright. A grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. She kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Just wait till the speech." That was the second red flag. The first had been the locked office door 2 nights ago and her flustered reaction when I walked in unannounced. She was crying, but she said it was from reading an old journal. The thing is, Lacey had never been a journal person, and she never cried over anything she didn't control. Still, I played along. I smiled. I nodded. I shook hands and accepted gifts I didn't want. Lacey floated from guest to guest like she was running for office. I didn't realize it yet, but she wasn't celebrating me, she was managing the crowd. After the cake was cut, almond hazelnut, which I hate, she clinked her glass with a spoon and walked to the microphone. My spine went stiff. Everyone gathered around. My name was on the banner, but I felt like I had no place in that room. Even my brother, Whit, leaned in close and muttered, "This feels weird. You okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't. And then Lacey started talking. "Thank you all for coming," she began, smiling sweetly. "Tonight isn't just about Colby turning 44. It's about honesty, about change, about growth." There was a ripple of laughter. Some clapped politely. I didn't move. Her voice got firmer. "You know, when you spend your whole life trying to be the perfect partner, sometimes you forget who you are. You forget what makes you feel alive." Something shifted in the room. It wasn't obvious at first. Just a stillness, like the wind before a storm. "And sometimes," she continued, "you meet someone who reminds you of everything you lost in yourself. Everything you buried to keep things comfortable." No one spoke. I felt my chest tighten. "I made a mistake," she said, "by staying silent for so long. But tonight, I'm choosing truth." That was when she looked directly at me. My stomach dropped. I didn't blink. "I'm leaving," she said. "Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight." A few gasps. A laugh, even someone who thought it was a joke. But I didn't laugh. She turned slightly, and that's when I saw him. Not someone I expected. Not a gym bro. Not a coworker. Not some cliché. It was Owen Lennox, my former best friend. The guy who lived with us for 3 months after his fiancée left him. The man who once cried on our couch at 3 a.m. because he felt like he'd never find love again. Now he was the man my wife had fallen in love with. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The look between them was enough. I stood there. I didn't yell. I didn't punch anything. I just looked at her, and the silence around me was louder than any scream. Then, without a word, I turned. And I walked out of my own birthday party. Out of the lie I'd been living in. Out of the home I thought I had. And into the cold, quiet night, where the real story was just beginning. I didn't go home that night. I walked 2 miles in stiff dress shoes until I found a diner that was still open. It was one of those all-night places with cracked vinyl booths, burnt coffee, and a waitress who didn't ask too many questions. I ordered scrambled eggs and a side of silence. That's all I could handle. My phone was vibrating nonstop. I didn't check it. I didn't want to know who was texting, whether it was my brother, someone from the party, or Lacey herself. I sat in that booth for hours, staring at the swirling patterns in my coffee like they had answers. The moment she said she was leaving, I realized something. I hadn't lost her that night. I had lost her long before. The signs were everywhere. Missed calls. Mysterious, late meetings. That new habit of locking her phone even when she was just stepping into the kitchen. And Owen? The man I once trusted with my own insecurities? The guy who once told me, "You've got a good one in Lacey. Don't screw that up." That was the real gut punch. Around 3 a.m., I finally turned on my phone. 56 unread messages. The most recent one was from Madison, Lacey's sister. It said, "Call me when you're ready. You need to know the whole story." That stopped me. The whole story? I dialed without even thinking. She answered on the first ring. "Colby," she whispered. "Please don't hang up." I didn't know she was going to do it like that. Not in front of everyone. I told her it was cruel. I stayed quiet. There's more. You need to know about what happened last winter. And about Mom. I froze. Her mom? What did that have to do with anything? She's been hiding things, Colby. Big things. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place, but it's gone too far now. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it had closed. All I could manage was, meet me tomorrow. Somewhere quiet. She agreed. I didn't go home. I booked a room at a motel near the highway. Not because I was afraid of confrontation, but because I didn't trust what I might find there. I needed answers before I stepped foot in that house again. The next morning, I woke to sunlight stabbing through the broken blinds. The pain in my chest hadn't faded overnight. If anything, it had settled deeper, like a dull stone lodged in my ribs. I didn't know it yet, but what Madison was about to reveal would make the Mike speech feel like child's play. Madison chose a spot off the grid, a walking trail at Elkwood Park, one of those wooded places with benches nobody really uses unless they're hiding something. When I got there, she was already sitting with a coffee in one hand and a cigarette she hadn't lit in the other. I'd never seen her smoke before. That alone told me this wasn't going to be easy to hear. She stood up awkwardly, like she didn't know whether to hug me or apologize. I gave her nothing, no smile, no handshake, no anger either. Just silence. That seemed to be enough for her to start talking. You were never supposed to find out like that, she began. Lacey's always had a thing for public drama. She thinks truth is louder when there's a crowd. I stared straight ahead. The cold air cut through my jacket, but I didn't move. Madison went on, look, I love my sister. I do, but she's not the person you married anymore. Hasn't been for a long time. I finally asked, how long? There was a pause. Almost 2 years, she said. My hands curled into fists without me realizing. 2 years. I whispered, you mean Owen? That long? Madison flinched. Not just Owen. My whole body went still. The earth could have cracked beneath me, and I wouldn't have noticed. She had someone else, she said carefully. Last winter. A guy from some business conference in Austin. She told me about it after too many glasses of wine. She called it a mistake that made her feel alive. Said it reminded her she still had power. The word power hit me in a way I can't describe. That's what this was about? Not love. Not heartbreak. Power? But it didn't stop there. Madison lowered her voice. And Colby, you know how Mom gave Lacey that lake house in Virginia? The one she promised was temporary until she updated the will? Lacey changed the paperwork. Without telling anyone. She made herself the sole owner and cut everyone else out. I felt sick. She's been using it, Madison added. Every few months. As her escape. She told people she was going there to unplug, but she wasn't alone. She brought Owen. And before him, probably others. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My jaw felt locked in place. She built a life outside the one you shared, Madison said. Like she was preparing for a second chapter, without you in it. And last night? That was her big reveal. She wanted the drama. She wanted to control the narrative. She didn't expect you to walk out without reacting. That's why she hasn't messaged you yet. She's waiting. She wants you to explode first, so she can play the victim. I sat down on the bench. Everything around me, the crunch of leaves, the rustle of branches overhead, felt distant, unreal. My entire marriage had been slowly disassembling behind my back while I was budgeting groceries, fixing our roof, and keeping us afloat during layoffs. She told me once, Madison continued, that she didn't think you'd ever leave. That you were too practical. Her words, not mine. Now, I turned to her. She was right about that, I said. I was never planning to leave her. And that was the truth. For all the warning signs, all the quiet suspicions I buried, I never prepared for a version of my life without Lacey in it. But she had. For years, she had. Madison handed me an envelope. These are pictures. Screenshots. Dates. In case you ever want to know everything. Not just from me. I took it, but didn't open it. As I got up to leave, she grabbed my wrist lightly and said, she doesn't get to be the only one who writes the ending. I didn't answer. But I knew she was right. The difference was Lacey made her move in front of an audience. Mine would be silent and devastating in its own way. When I finally unlocked the front door the next day, it was just past 6 p.m. The house was quiet. Not empty, just eerily still, like it was holding its breath. Lacey's car was in the driveway, but there were no lights on inside. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, like I was crossing into someone else's home. I didn't call out her name. I wasn't there to talk. The moment I stepped into the living room, I noticed it, one of our wedding photos missing from the wall. It used to hang between the bookshelves, next to a framed concert ticket from our first date. That frame was still there. But the photo? Gone. Like she had surgically removed pieces of us before I even arrived. I walked slowly through each room, taking inventory not of things, but of absences. The bedroom closet had gaps in the hangers. A drawer in the bathroom had been cleared out. No goodbye letter. No text. Just a trail of silent decisions. Then I noticed something on the kitchen table. Her keys. And next to them, a red flash drive. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I had this sudden feeling that whatever was on it wasn't meant to explain, it was meant to control. Like she was curating her version of the story, even after she'd already detonated the first part. Instead, I walked to my office, shut the door, and sat down for the first time in days. My desk still had a sticky note on it with a grocery list we'd made together last week: chicken, oatmeal, toothpaste. It looked so ordinary, so laughably normal, like two people hadn't just shredded their marriage in front of friends and family. I powered up my laptop and, despite everything in me screaming not to, I opened the envelope Madison had given me. The first photo was of Lacey and Owen at a beachside cabin, date stamped 3 months ago, when she'd told me she was visiting her aunt in Kentucky. Then another, her sitting on his lap in the passenger seat of his Jeep. Her laughing. Her smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. The screenshots came next. Messages. Some were short. Some were stupid. Some were heartbreaking. But one stuck with me like a knife behind my ribs. It was hers, sent to Owen at 2:14 a.m. I can't wait to finally be done pretending. I'm so tired of playing house with a man who feels like a ghost. That's how she saw me. A ghost. Someone who had been right there, every day, doing the laundry, listening to her bad days at work, holding her when her dad died, and I was just a hollow figure to her. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark in my own home, wondering how many years of my life had been real and how many were just her waiting for an exit. I didn't open the flash drive until the following afternoon. I had stared at it on the kitchen table for hours, unsure if I even wanted to hear her version. But eventually, curiosity overpowered caution. Not because I wanted closure. I knew there wouldn't be any, but because I needed to understand what kind of woman records her betrayal like a project presentation. There were 3 files. One was titled, "For Colby." I clicked it. A video opened. She was sitting in our bedroom, wearing a sweater I'd bought her last Christmas. The lighting was soft. Her makeup perfect. She looked like she was giving a TED Talk on heartbreak. "Colby," she began, her voice calm, rehearsed. "If you're watching this, I hope it's after some of the anger is settled. I wanted to explain things you probably didn't see coming, even if part of you always knew." She paused, gave a tight smile. "I didn't fall out of love with you overnight. It happened slowly. The little things you stopped noticing when I changed my hair or when I got quiet. And maybe I stopped trying to reach you. I don't know. But Owen, he saw me. He made me feel alive again." I closed the laptop. That was enough. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because she made it sound like neglect justified betrayal. Like my calmness, my loyalty, my silence through her storms had somehow pushed her into someone else's arms. I didn't need to see the rest. This wasn't an apology. It was a performance. Later that day, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "She's planning to serve you this week. Don't let her blindside you again." No name. No context. But I knew it was true. And just like that, I realized something. She hadn't just left me. She was preparing to erase me. Legally. Financially. Publicly. She wanted to win. But I was no longer the ghost she thought I was. The next morning, I met with an attorney. Her name was Rena Carr, short, serious, no small talk. She scanned through the screenshots, the pictures, even the video from the flash drive, her expression never changing. After about 20 minutes, she looked at me and said, "She's not just trying to end a marriage. She's building a strategy. You're not in an emotional collapse, Colby. You're in a chess match." Those words woke something up in me. It had been a week since the party. A week since Lacey dropped her betrayal like a party balloon and walked out without consequences. But I was starting to realize she didn't expect resistance. She expected the same man who sat quietly through her detachment to just roll over. But I wasn't that man anymore. Rena explained the financial landscape. Lacey had been quietly moving money from our joint accounts into one she opened under her LLC. That LLC was supposedly for a boutique design company she never really launched. The kicker? It was under both our names when it started. But she had recently filed paperwork removing me entirely. I've seen this before, Rena said. It's not about the money itself. It's about power. She wants you stunned while she takes control. I asked what my options were. She smiled faintly. You want peaceful, or you want smart? I said, smart. That night, I began gathering everything: emails, receipts, calendar logs. I found records of her trips to the lake house, tracked against our shared Google account. Photos in the cloud she hadn't deleted. A few even showed Owen wearing my clothes. My actual shirts. One was the navy one I wore to my dad's retirement dinner. It should have broken me. It didn't. It clarified something. Lacey didn't just betray me emotionally or physically. She took my life, the history I thought we shared, and turned it into a stage. She wore my loyalty like a costume while she auditioned for the next version of her life. But the one thing she never expected? That I'd start writing my own version of the ending. I wasn't going to humiliate her. That would give her the drama she craved. Instead, I planned to remove every piece of myself from her story, legally, financially, socially, before she even realized it was happening. The next morning, I filed for divorce. Quietly. No warning. No phone call. No audience. Just a signature and a process server with the most carefully timed delivery during brunch with her mother. And then I moved the money she hadn't noticed, my inheritance from my uncle's estate, still sitting in a dormant account she didn't have access to. Every cent. I closed our shared streaming services, removed my name from every subscription, canceled our anniversary trip she never planned to take. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. She thought I'd disappear. Instead, I went invisible, strategically. 3 days after she was served, Lacey showed up at the house. Not to talk, not to apologize, but to reclaim what she assumed was still hers. She walked in without knocking, using the old code she must have forgotten I'd changed 2 days prior. The door didn't open. I watched her from the upstairs window as she tried it twice, then stepped back in confusion. Her phone buzzed in her hand, probably Owen, probably asking if I'd cracked yet. I didn't go down. I just watched her from behind the curtain, quiet and calm. When she finally noticed the cameras, new ones I installed outside, she looked right at one of them and laughed. That dry, passive-aggressive laugh she used to give me whenever I made a point she couldn't argue with. She rang the bell once. Then again. Finally, she pulled out her phone and called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Colby, I don't know what you're doing or why you're being like this, but we need to talk. You don't just serve someone and vanish. That's not how grown people handle things. Ironic. She humiliated me publicly with a mic in her hand, and I was the one not handling things like a grown-up? I spent the rest of that day boxing up the last of my things. I'd already arranged for a corporate apartment through my company, temporary housing, until I figured out what I really wanted. I didn't need the house. I didn't want the bed we shared. I didn't even take the couch. But I left her one thing. On the kitchen counter, I placed the photo she removed from the wall, the one of us on our wedding day. I didn't write a note. I didn't frame it. I just laid it face up, where she'd see it. Because I wanted her to understand something very simple. I didn't erase her. She erased me. That night, I drove to the new place, smaller, quieter, without the ghost of her voice in every corner. I opened a bottle of beer, sat on the floor, and finally breathed. It didn't feel like freedom yet, but it felt like mine. Over the next week, I got emails. Some from her. Some from mutual friends. Most were polite on the surface, but all of them had the same undertone. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you fight? The truth? Because I don't fight to stay where I was never welcome. I don't scream into rooms where I was made invisible. Instead, I moved in silence. I contacted HR at her company with the timeline of her affair, complete with emails that confirmed she had used a client trip to spend 3 days with Owen in Asheville. That wasn't out of spite. It was a fact. And her contract included a clause about business integrity and reputational risk. I also sent a letter to the HOA regarding frequent overnight visits from a non-resident male guest to a property still under joint ownership. Why? Because she never thought I'd remember the fine print. Every piece of the life she built without me, built behind my back, was being quietly, legally unraveled. And she knew it. She finally texted me at midnight one night. No filters, no sarcasm. What are you doing to me? I read it twice. And then I typed. Only what you gave me permission to. I hit send, then turned off my phone. A month after the party, the divorce was already in motion. My lawyer moved swiftly, quicker than Lacey had anticipated. Her initial demands didn't land. Not because I argued louder, but because I had facts, documents, receipts. Truth was on my side, even if I carried it in silence. She tried to reach out twice more, once through her lawyer, once through an email titled, "Let's Talk Like Adults." I didn't respond to either. I didn't need to. That version of me, the man who would have sat down, begged for answers, tried to hold together something already shattered, he was gone. Not angry. Just done. The day I signed the final paperwork, I went to a coffee shop I hadn't been to in years. It was the place I took Lacey when we were still dating. Back then, she used to steal my cinnamon roll when she thought I wasn't looking. I sat in the corner, alone, and ordered one just for myself this time. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful. I thought that was just a myth, that peace only came years after a heartbreak, once everything faded. But it wasn't. Peace came when I realized that I didn't lose anything that wasn't already walking away from me. And I didn't need to chase what never looked back. A week later, I got a message from my older sister, Mira. She'd heard everything, through the family grapevine, of course, but she didn't call to rehash it. She said, "You've got an empty guest room now, right?" I laughed. Technically, yeah. Why? My kid wants to see New York for spring break. You could use some noise in that quiet apartment of yours. And just like that, something shifted. I started rebuilding, not just furniture or routine, but joy. I volunteered for a design mentorship program through my firm. I reconnected with an old college friend who'd also gone through a blindsiding breakup. We had lunch, then dinner, then a walk in the rain that felt more like a beginning than anything I'd felt in years. Her name was Meryl. She didn't ask about Lacey. She didn't need to. She asked about my music collection, my childhood, my dreams, things I'd forgotten were still inside me. One evening, as we walked by the river, she said something that stuck with me. "It's wild how someone can make you feel invisible, until the right person reminds you you've always been real." I looked at her and smiled. I didn't need to explain. She already saw me. So here I am, writing this not as a warning or a revenge story or a therapy session, but as a reminder to anyone who's ever felt erased. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight to be free. You just have to walk away quietly, clearly, and completely. That's what I did. And I didn't get even. I got everything else.